Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
And we are locked and loaded, ladies and gentlemen, for another one. For the archives, the Conspiracy Farm. Jeffrey Wilson rolling shotgun with my good buddy, UFC Hall of Famer, Pat Miletich. How are we doing this fine day, champ?
Nobody cares because we have a great guest.
Well, we always care how we're doing. Come on.
No, I just want to get to the doctor. I'm excited to talk to this gentleman, super intelligent man that has dissected so many things that, I mean, we want to get his take on it, so I don't want to waste time talking, to be frank.
Well, absolutely. I just wanted to be nice and give you a greetings and salutations.
It's very kind of you. It's very kind of you. Let's move on.
He yells at me when I don't introduce him, and when I do, he takes exception. But like he said, we have an amazing guest today. I've been following this gentleman for a very long time. Was a little worried about him at the beginning of this summer, man, because he wound up popping on the radar, and we're going to talk about it, of Special Counsel Mueller. He is a scholar, an author. Author of a great many of books, most recently Killing the Deep State, and the very most recently is Coup d'etat, exposing deep state treason and the plan to re-elect Donald Trump. I thank him so very much for his time today. I interrupted him from the hearings today that we're going to talk about as well. Dr. Jerome Corsi, how are we doing today, sir?
I'm great. Good to be with you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Again, how's your summer been? You've been a little busy, like around springtime, around the beginning of summer. Yeah, things start picking up for you. How's things been going for you?
Well, I'm better all the time. I mean, as you know, I spent 40 hours with the Mueller special prosecutor team, and they ultimately threatened to indict me. They gave me actually a plea deal. They said I was lying to them. I didn't lie, and in fact, I refused their plea deal, and they did not indict me, which meant they had no case. But the issue was that the Mueller team was convinced that I had worked with Julian Assange and had introduced Roger Stone to Julian Assange. This was part of their collusion theory, that Roger Stone, through me, got in contact with Assange, and then talking to Donald Trump, the candidate, or the president, they coordinated with Assange as to how to release these emails on John Podesta so as to best do damage to Hillary Clinton's campaign, except that it never happened. I don't know Assange. I never met Assange. First day I forgot some emails, but I did not knowingly and willfully give them information I knew to be false on a material subject to mislead them. I mean, they're talking about emails I'd written in 2016 that I never gave much thought to, and I just didn't really remember. But they were there, and I amended my testimony. So when the prosecutor got angry at me and wanted to indict me, one charge was my unamended testimony, not acknowledging that they'd allowed me to correct the memory mistake, which I did. So I considered it to be entirely fraudulent, and I was not indicted, and I'm glad it's all over.
Well, you do, I could be mistaken, do you not have a case against Robert Mueller because of all this? Okay.
Well, I wrote a book, and this also, Silent No More. The subtitle is How I Became a Political Prisoner to Mueller's Witch Hunt. And we filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in federal district court against Mueller. And that's right now in the U.S. District Court in Washington. We're waiting for a hearing on whether or not the judge in the case will allow the case to be heard or go along with the government's motion to dismiss. We'll take the case all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. I'm convinced the Mueller investigation was a fraud, and it was politically motivated.
For sure.
I say that in Silent No More, and I show that with the way I was treated in my testimony. I went in to cooperate. I brought in all my computers, my laptops, everything, and voluntarily handed them over to the government because I had nothing to hide. And then the prosecutors, Mueller's team, had this theory that I was the connection to Assange. And they held on to that like a dog chewing a bone. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't let go of it.
Well, what did that do? What did that have to do necessarily with their initial charges of President Trump colluding with Russia? Like, what was the nexus there?
The case came down to saying that Trump, this was the government's theory, that Trump gave promises to Russia that if he were elected, he would ease the sanctions on Russia. And in return, Russia would steal these emails and give them to Julian Assange. And through Roger Stone, Donald Trump would get in touch with Assange and collude with Assange as to how to release these emails that Russia had stolen. There are several problems. I don't think Russia stole the emails.
Right.
I know I did not connect Roger Stone to Julian Assange. And Assange didn't seem to need anybody's help as to when he was going to release these emails. He's very adept on his own with using media. And so therefore, I think the whole government premise was faulty and had no substance to it whatsoever. Obviously, I'm right because the Mueller report concluded no Russian collusion.
Yes.
Well, and from what we've learned, at least, to our knowledge, that it sounds like, the emails going missing from the DNC and ending up with Julian Assange were an inside job anyway, i.e. Seth Rich potentially. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's Seth Rich too. And this new book coming out, Coup d'etat, I read a chapter saying that I think it was clearly not the Russians who stole the emails. Julian Assange has said repeatedly that he did not get these stolen Democrat emails from Assange. But yet, the prosecutors, now Nadler, who today is going after Corey Lewandowski and yet another circus on the impeachment charges.
Yeah.
And it's pathetic because the Democrats, these socialist Democrats, do not need truth or don't care about truth. They create narratives.
Right.
And
exactly.
The narratives can be false, most likely are false, but they become a matter of ideological religious creed for the hard left. And that's very, very difficult. It should not be that way in American politics because we should be able to have substantive debate and matters of fact and truth should matter.
Well, and it gets even more frustrating when this narrative for 2 years, as we saw, gets reinforced by the mainstream media.
Yes, and this narrative won't go away because as I write, I pointed this out. I've been writing a lot on all this and killing the deep state, that this is a matter of a propaganda attack. And in a propaganda attack, it's not based on truth, and you can't refute it by showing the claims of the propaganda are false. So you say, well, there's no, the Mueller team, after all this money, all these witnesses, all this investigation, found no Russian collusion. And Nadler says, well, they just didn't look hard enough.
It's always something, right?
Always something. It's there. We know it was collusion. We know that Trump was a Russian spy. But, and we're not interested in any information that Hillary Clinton sold uranium-1 to Russia, and the foundation got $140-some million in payment on that. That we don't want to investigate that. We just want to know how we can prove Donald Trump is a Russian spy.
Well,
and so essentially all of this is a smokescreen and buying themselves time in my mind. And you were simply one of the victims in the way of the train coming at you.
I think by telling Mueller to take a hike, that I was not going to go along with, they said they put me in jail for the rest of my life. Well, if I have to stand before a judge and lie, swearing I committed a crime I did not commit, if that's what it takes to stay out of jail in America, I guess they might as well just put me in prison for the rest of my life.
That's
thought.
Yeah, it is. It's just a scary precedent. And even kind of just going back and speaking about the Seth Rich thing, you talk about people just ignoring, relevant facts. They've ascertained through basically the digital forensics that it wasn't an online through the internet hack, if you will. It was a leak through basically a flash drive, a jump drive, something directly into the computer. Is that correct?
Yes. That's certainly a group of experts from the NSA who did an analysis and published it in The Nation, which is not exactly a conservative publication, and said that the analyzing the time in which these various emails were accessed and stolen, the various documents stolen from the Democrats, there was not enough time for it to have been a hack based on the metadata analysis. And So there's good forensic indication. And I mean, Julian Assange was quite persuasive to me. I don't think Julian Assange has ever lied. I don't think he's ever used any release of information that was not validated to have been government secrets, that have been legitimate government documents.
Right.
Julian Assange has a great reputation for telling the truth. And if he said that the emails that were stolen from the Democrats did not come from Russia, I think he ought to be believed, at least prima facie on its face.
Right.
And, to have to prove he's lying. And no one to this point, we had this intelligence community assessment that was negotiated by Clapper and Brennan. Well, the two of them have lied to Congress. I distinctly remember James Clapper as head of the director of national intelligence telling Congress that the NSA did, quote, not wittingly, whatever that means, do any electronic surveillance of U.S. citizens, when we know from reports that were made public after Admiral Rogers, who headed the NSA, clamped down on NSA improprieties, that there were massive violations of law with the NSA, not only collecting information electronically from American citizens, but releasing it inappropriately, including to the White House, in a way that ultimately the names of the U.S. citizens were unmasked or disclosed, and some of them leaked to the press. I mean, these are any number of crimes committed there. And James Clapper's telling Congress, he said, I didn't understand the question. Well, I mean,
oh my God.
Well, ask for a clarification if you don't understand the question. I mean, he said, I was trying to tell the truth to the best that you can tell the truth. Well, he could have asked for the session to go classified to answer that question. I mean, the fact is James Clapper lied to Congress, and the Department of Justice did not prosecute him for it.
And I want to ask you a question on Julian Assange. When he was arrested, Jeff, my co-host, was pretty upset, and I was hoping that he was going to be brought back and put on trial, because I was thinking in my head that the process of the discovery process would end up exposing the DNC, Clinton, Obama, Clapper, Brennan, Mueller, all of them, in basically, going through all the documentation and showing that everything they've said is false.
Well, I mean, I don't know that our government really wants to prosecute Assange. I think the government's got a very, very weak case. Right. Assange was not indicted for anything having to do with 2016.
Correct.
He was indicted for the 2010 publication of Chelsea Manning's material, that, the Army officer who stole cables, etc., and gave them to Assange. But in 2010, the Department of Justice declined on prosecuting Assange, because Assange is protected under Supreme Court decisions on the First Amendment, notably the Pentagon Papers case that said the Washington Post and the New York Times were allowed to publish the Pentagon Papers, even though they were classified and stolen by Daniel Ellsberg, stolen from the Rand Corporation, copied on a Xerox machine at the time, 1971, and the papers got a hold of them and were allowed to publish them. Well, Julian Assange was publishing classified information. One of the allegations of the government is that he helped steal by breaking a password for Manning so Manning could get more documents. But the record makes it clear that Assange told Manning they were unable to break the password. Assange is not a hacker. He is a publisher of stolen material.
Right. What are your thoughts? I mean, we're into bizarre world, and I don't mean to throw so much out there, but I mean, on its face, going after Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, and violating just completely a tried and true, privilege of attorney-client privilege. And then, what happened with Assange? Like, they literally invaded foreign territory to take him out of there. Wasn't that just a complete violation of foreign and international law on its face?
Well, technically, Assange was arrested because he'd violated his agreement with the government to surrender himself on a case where he was charged, I believe, in Sweden with a rape, which apparently never happened. The rape never occurred.
I thought that had been dropped. I thought they dropped
No,
that.
well, the case was dropped, but see, under British law, Assange, instead of appearing in court, went into hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy. So he, as it were, like violated his a court order to appear and surrender himself in that trial for the So it's very technical. I mean that, but yet
always.
And in fact, Assange has now served his time on that violation, that technical violation, and the British courts have now decided they're still going to incarcerate Assange because he's a flight risk, and the extradition proceedings are yet going on. So they don't want to let Assange go where he could run out of the country, and prohibiting the United States from being able to extradite him. I'm not sure the United States is going to even win the extradition proceedings. And if they do, they're going to bring Julian Assange back here. Julian Assange has got a very good case. And I'm not sure the government can win the case that they brought against Assange. Assange is a journalist, and is the indicting of Assange, I think, threatens any of us who are working as journalists or in any way to produce news or get information out.
Well, that's scary because you brought up, the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg. I mean, we never would have known about like things like the My Lai massacre, et cetera. And even though, like you said, it was classified information, he never was prosecuted for it. But what's changed now?
Well,
we're seeing, obviously through NDAA, they're able to utilize propaganda in the American people. They're demonizing truth tellers like Julian Assange. So it's like people who are trying to tell the truth and speak truth to power now that's illegal.
Well, the My Lai massacre was not revealed by the Pentagon Papers. That came from the
my bad.
Journalism, a very well-known journalist. His name is escaping me right at the second. I can think of it in a minute, but very, very famous journalist. And but the Pentagon Papers showed that from the very beginning of the Vietnam War, Lyndon Johnson and Secretary McNamara knew that that the war could not be won the way they were fighting it, and yet that we allowed 50,000 men and women to go to their deaths in Vietnam on a fraud war, fraudulently sold to the American people and not fought so it could be won. Now, the hard left, the Democrats, the socialists at that time, wanted the Pentagon Papers released and published by the New York Times and the Washington Post because it was exposing Richard Nixon, who continued to fight the war despite running for president saying he would end the war. And they were going against a Republican president in an unpopular war. Today, the hard left, the deep state, as I've been calling them recently, is wants to punish Assange because releasing these emails from the Democrats exposed Hillary Clinton and John Podesta, who were the darlings of the socialist hard left. So it's political. The hard left really comes out on questions not for principled reasons, but for political reasons.
Yes.
Which side of the road they're fighting an issue depends on how they'll argue principle. Because I pointed out earlier, principle does not mean much to the ideologically
Right.
hard left socialists.
No, it doesn't.
Well, in the world today, and we talk about it all the time on this show, going back to your Gulf of Tonkin or incubators being pushed over or WMDs, we just never see any accountability when it comes to this stuff. And here we are with literally a coup against a sitting president, even before he was president. And for me, I'm waiting for it all to play out. I know the whole queue and waiting for the storm and trusting the plan, but it's like Comey just walked. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are still out. McCabe is still. I mean, no, I'm just not seeing any accountability for something that was so egregious. And then individuals like you or Michael Cohen or Manafort, they're doing not you, but I mean, just indicted on charges having nothing to do with this collusion. But yet the main players of this game are walking free, and people are wondering, like yourself, Bob Barr, is he going to do anything? Is he deep state? We're all waiting for this with bated breath for something to happen. Hillary's still out there, knowing what those emails said.
Basically, that if nothing happens, then we've all been played, is what we're saying.
Well, by the way, the reporter's name was Seymour Hersh.
I was going to say, okay.
Who exposed the My Lai massacre.
Right.
We're all wondering about Barr, if he's going to get any indictments. And if there's no indictments of these coup d'etat criminals, from the Hillary Clinton crowd. The American public are not going to have confidence in the justice system ever again.
No.
Going to be a severe damage to the justice system. Now, I'm hopeful that the decision of Barr and the Justice Department to prosecute Andrew McCabe is an indication that the next Horowitz report is going to have conclusions that the 4 FISA applications to get electronic surveillance on Carter Page were illegal.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then McCabe is facing far more severe charges than simply lying to the federal investigators, which are the charges in that separate report of some 78 or so pages that was released on McCabe about a year ago. At any rate, it's slow, and it's frustratingly so.
Yes,
but
it is.
I say in this new book, Coup d'etat, and I actually say this in Killing Deep State. I wrote Killing Deep State in 2017, and I said there'll be 3 phases. First phase will be Mueller fails to find any collusion or obstruction. That's happened. So the second phase would be that there's going to be a Trump counterattack. And the Trump counterattack is going to bring to justice these criminals who were engaged in a coup d'etat. This was an attempt to take over the presidency illegally by a treasonous conspiracy. And it included the highest levels of our justice system and intelligence system, and they were working in conjunction with foreign intelligence, notably with British intelligence. And the third phase, which I said second phase of these indictments and cases beginning, will take all the way up until election dates, November in 2020. But by that time, phase 3 will have kicked in, and that is the American public will have had enough time and enough will have been revealed where the American public conclude that it was a treasonous conspiracy, and at the top of that conspiracy were Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as conspirators.
Jeez, what a freaking gift that would be. What a pre-Christmas gift. But I mean, honestly, and Pat knows me better than you, obviously, good doctor. I'm just cynical, man. The world has made me a cynical human being. All these different assassinations and coup d'etats and changing of elections and Hillary selling uranium. I want to see it happen more than anybody. But is that, really Obama? Are we going to see these perp walks to Gitmo like we've been promised from so many different avenues?
Well,
Hillary and Obama? Is that possible?
It's very possible. And I think whether or not what's going to ultimately be how they're adjudicated. But I think, I'm not sure whether we're going to really follow through with convicting a former president and Secretary of State of treason. But I think the American people are going to be demanding it.
Could they at least impeach a former president?
Well, Nixon was not impeached. Nixon resigned. Clinton was impeached. Because impeachment refers to bringing it to a vote in the House to bring it to trial in the Senate. That's the impeachment.
Right.
The trial is the removing of the president from office, and Clinton was not convicted in the Senate trial. So he was impeached but not removed from office.
Right.
And what I'm saying is I think different today is I think that this whole controversy over Donald Trump and Donald Trump's presidency, I think, has been significant because so many millions of Americans are finally waking up. The Democrats and the hard left went so apoplectic. They went insane when Hillary lost, that they've now come right out and shown the American people that all these candidates running on the Democratic side for president are socialists. And one can't out-socialize the other. Even Bernie Sanders is having to promise more free stuff than he planned on just to keep his position as the old socialist in the group.
Yeah.
Beto wants to confiscate your guns. Kamala Harris wants to have abortions on demand, even late-term abortions, and if the baby survives and you don't want it, let it die, or kill it. There's even the case where Barack Obama, I wrote about this in Abomination, the case with the nurse Jill Stanek, and it was debated in the Chicago Senate when he was a Senate legislator in Illinois, where a baby was born, survived an abortion attempt, and Obama argued on the floor of the Illinois Senate that the mother had a right to have the baby die. They put the baby into they threw the baby basically away in I believe among some dirty linens or something, and left the baby to die. This nurse found the baby and tried to comfort the baby until the baby did die.
People are evil.
And you know, that's infanticide to me. That's murder.
It is absolutely 100%. You can't slice it any other way.
No, it's like hearing that this summer. That I think it was a Virginia governor on the radio station of like, yeah, we'll the baby can be born. The mom can consult with the doctor. We'll keep the baby comfortable after they're born, and we're going to have a discussion before we kill it. Essentially, paraphrasing was what that conversation was about legalizing infanticide. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the American people see this, and the average person is going to say that's insane. I mean, I think late-term abortion is essentially murder because the baby could survive, and you go in there and you brutally cut up the fetus and destroy it. It's obviously a living creature. And, I think it's murder. In late-term abortion, it has to be very, very exceptional circumstances for it to be justified. The health of the mother being, I think, for me, probably the only real consideration that would mean you could even consider a late-term abortion. But at any rate, all the LGBT agenda. Well, now we're being told that, gender is self-determined. So there's maybe 100 genders. Are there a million agendas?
Right.
How many? 375 million different sexes in the United States, depending upon what somebody thinks they are.
Yeah. That's
what happened to men. What happened to men and women? And so you hear this, then you hear, well, we're going to tax all these. We're going to not have cars. We're not going to have cows. We're not going to have plastic straws. I mean, who wants to live in a world run by these people?
Yeah. Well, and then you have AOC, like, I'm not going to have a kid for a while because I don't want to keep messing up the planet, et cetera, et cetera. It is on its face insane. But kind of going back to just the Mueller and the collusion, we've all, like I said, just been waiting, and I'm, again, frustrated. What got me started on all this conspiracy stuff, Doctor, was the JFK assassination, like a many of people. And, the Warren Commission was just a sham. It was the Fox investigating who got into the hen house, et cetera, et cetera. And, like the left, they're like, all right, well, you wait till Mueller gets up on and testifies in front of Congress. And Mueller looked terrible. He looked like an old, clueless old man that didn't even know some of the key aspects of all of this.
Yeah, I thought that was a good act.
Do you think that's what it was? I mean, because I was just like, it was scary to me. I'm like, whoa, you guys are all hinging your bets on this guy?
Well, you got two alternatives. One, he really is that gone in his mind and old and infirm, in which case he should not have been running the investigation. Or two, he knew that crimes had been committed in the investigation. It would be just better if he didn't remember very much.
Well, and he was like, I can't talk about this. I can't talk about this. I can't talk about that.
The latter of the two seems very likely. And I just see the, right now in my head, there are litmus tests out on Trump. I know that the jury is still out for Jeffrey as far as Trump goes. Will these people be prosecuted is one of the litmus tests. And one of the other major litmus tests on Trump is he going to bite on, these, what we consider potentially false flag attacks by Iran on oil tankers, on pipelines, and now on Saudi Arabian refineries.
Well,
is he going to end up hitting Iran? It's a little worrisome.
Well, I think from what he's done so far, and certainly, I've been on many shows on this since I wrote Atomic Iran in 2005. Trump is not anxious to go to war. He said very clearly yesterday he doesn't want to be in war with anybody, and I think that's true. I mean, the problem is right now what's working is the sanctions, and Iran is being, for the first time under Trump, squeezed to where the internal politics threaten the mullahs, this radical Islamic regime, remaining in power in Iran. And that what Iran is doing is they're trying to force somebody to attack them. Now, on the attack on the oil fields, which just occurred, I think Trump's reaction is appropriate. One is he's not left to judgment to say it was Iran, although I think everybody with half a brain understands that Iran was behind the attack. But secondly, it's Saudi Arabia was hit. And if Saudi Arabia wants to do a military response, we'll support them logistically. But, we're not going to be anxious to go attack Iran. It doesn't solve anything. Attacking Iran just creates sympathy for the regime, allows them to portray us as the aggressors. And, what Iran is trying to do is to be the victim here. So let's not hand it to them too easily.
Right. Well, I mean, how does it behoove them? I mean, I'm not doubting what you're saying. They attacked it, but it's just like it seems we're itching, and the neocons are itching to go to war over there. Why would Iran just kind of give them what they want and just risk getting glass parking lotted or just turned into a, like Iraq? What's the benefit?
The whole Iranian psychology, which is thinking there has to be this apocalypse before their Mahdi, their savior, their Messiah, comes out of the well and Shiite Islam triumphs over Sunni Islam, which is really their fundamental gripe, even more so than hating Jews, and hating us. They hate Sunnis. At any rate, the Iranians feel that chaos and conflict work in their favor. I mean, it's the same kind of methodology as Saul Alinsky or the communists. The more conflict, the more chaos. I mean, it's almost satanic. If you can't win, at least cause massive violence and confusion and kill people and have horrible things happen and nuclear bombs dropped and all kinds of, because that's at least better than having God win.
That seems like what we've been doing. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, funding ISIS, the MEK in Iran.
The Saudis have certainly funded enough terrorists to.
The point is, let's just talk about Trump. Trump so far has not expanded any war,
right?
And he has refrained from going into wars. And I've that's been my policy and has been for quite a while. I'm not a neocon. I don't agree with John Bolton on this. I think John Bolton
This is wonderful to hear.
Yeah. I think John Bolton is just wrong on this. I mean, yes, Iran is extremely dangerous, and these mullahs who have imposed on Iran a foreign religion. The original Persians were Zoroastrian; they weren't Muslims.
Very true.
And the language spoken by, they're Arabic. I mean, you're not dealing with Farsi, which of course the mullahs speak Farsi, but I'm saying the language of Islam has traditionally been Arabic because it is a Arabian religion in its roots.
Well, obviously Zoroastrianism, that goes back to biblical times, and Islam didn't come around until like the 4th century or whatever it was.
But it continued. You'll still find Zoroastrians in Iran. But my point is this. My point is that war in the Middle East is the problem. It's not the solution. Israel's got to be prepared to defend itself. There's no doubt about that. But, even the countries have repeatedly gone against war against Israel have largely concluded it's a waste of time. And that's including Egypt and it's including Saudi Arabia. Right. If Turkey could ever get this idea in its head, instead of Erdogan going more and more over to the radical side of Islam, if you had Turkey joining forces, Iran could be countered just simply within the region on the basis of Sunni Shiite politics. Because the last thing that the Saudis want is to see Iran expand its influence in Iraq and then to take a grip hold on Lebanon with Hezbollah and to support Hamas in the Gaza. The Hezbollah is Shiite. Iraq is three. It's these and the Kurds, Shiite, Sunni, and Kurd. And this was all the Syria issue was again the Shiites in Iran and also with the Houthis in Yemen.
Right.
The Iran is supporting them against Saudi Arabia because Iran had fought like a 10-year war in the 80s against Iraq, against Saddam Hussein. They're itching to fight a war against the Saudis. And, the Saudis may launch a retaliatory strike on Iran's oil. Now, Iran just wants chaos. And if Saudi Arabia decides they want to attack Iran, that's a national security issue that the Saudis have to decide for themselves. And I would advise President Trump to stay out of it.
So you don't think, I mean, anymore it seems like warfare, I mean, you just don't, I mean, obviously we're in a huge war, bombs, et cetera, but it seems like a lot of more engagement of asymmetrical warfare, be it economic or covert operations, is taking place in place of more symmetrical warfare. Do you give any credence, or do you lend any credence to people who say, you know, countries like a Israel are engaging in kind of black ops covert operations to create a certain sentiment, you know, and blame on certain other countries that's, you know, that's happened historically, you know, do something, you know, false flags essentially to blame on other countries?
I don't see any basis for that with Israel. I mean, Israel, I've spent, you know, I've worked reporting on and talking to, you know, being in Israel, knowing the government, knowing the people who are involved. Israel has, of course, as we do, an active intelligence service. And as we do, they have the capability of doing undercover operations. And I don't doubt that they have done some. But the point is that they're not doing them to create false flags. And, you know, if there were false flags, you go back to the Tonkin Gulf and how Lyndon Johnson manipulated it.
Yeah,
right.
You know, that's a false flag. But I don't see that Donald Trump is engaging in any of those activities. Right now, what Iran is doing is Iran supporting surrogates in the region who will cause chaos and war and expand terrorism, because Iran views that this chaos is in their ultimate advantage. And the Europeans will come to appease Iran, say, if you'll just stop doing this, we'll give you money. I mean, how much money did Barack Obama ship on pallets and cargo planes to Iran?
That's where this, in my mind, leads to partially. We're not thinking in any way, shape, or form that Trump's administration is part of the false flag operation. We're thinking it could be very easily deep state and past administration actors who were the people that sent those pallets of money, and now people, including the mullahs and generals, possibly have to take a few orders from the globalists. That's all we're saying.
I mean, first of all, the Obama administration with John Kerry and John Brennan were outright in their support of Iran. Just didn't require any false flag or hidden message. I mean, John Brennan went through the entire justice and intelligence apparatus of the United States and removed any reference to radical Islam as terrorists. The terrorists under the Obama administration were white supremacists. That's where this started. And, you know, the white supremacists in the United States are, I'm sure there are some, but they're no force the same way that radical Islam is a force in terms of violence, or Iran.
I haven't even met any of them.
I've never met one either. I mean, David Duke or whomever. I mean, the average American is not racially motivated. I mean, when I grew up in the 50s, the Democrats were the racists. The Democrats were the ones who were segregationists. The Democrats were the ones who were the slaveholders going back to the Civil War. But, you know, you watch Spielberg's movie on Lincoln, and you don't realize that the congressmen and senators who are pushing for the 13th Amendment, those are the Republicans.
Right.
There's the Democrats in there who are opposing it. That's never made clear in the movie because Spielberg wanted to portray Lincoln as Obama as a Lincoln figure, which was a joke. But at any rate, you know, the tilt toward Islam, the destabilizing of Egypt, Mubarak, the killing of Gaddafi, the Arab Spring, the imposition of the Muslim Brotherhood all through the Middle East, the Muslim Brotherhood's increasing influence within the U.S. government under Obama. Culturally, Obama was clearly tilted towards Islam. There's no doubt about it. And he telegraphed that clearly. And it's shocking to me how much the Democratic Party has turned against Israel. And it just seems to me that that's unfounded, because Israel, you know, no country is perfect, but Israel is a ally and a country that is run by democratic principles in the Middle East. And we need all the allies in the Middle East we can get. And you know, from my own perspective, biblically, I think there is good support for viewing Truman's decision in 1948 as biblically determined that the Jews would return to Israel and create this new country, Israel, and that once the Jews were back, they would never be gone.
Well, there's certainly probably going to be some comments and, probably some debate. Israel, no country is perfect, but I mean, the upholding of democratic principles when they're doing some of these things of bulldozing houses and things that's going on in the West Bank and Palestine.
I'm on Israel's side.
I'm with you. I'm just saying, I think we need to be intellectually honest when we talk about us going over, Iran's causing chaos. I get it, but we're also been funding ISIS in Syria. Benghazi, what happened? We just had on Chris Paranto, who was one of the surviving SEALs in Benghazi, and he was frustrated as hell with these stand-down orders. Like, why can't we go in and save these guys?
Again, we're talking about Obama, and Obama was clearly on the side. Hillary invited these jihadis into Lebanon to destabilize Lebanon,
right?
And not Lebanon. I'm sorry, Libya, and to kill Gaddafi. They sided with this. Obama sided with this UN resolution, that we are just to protect the innocent. We have a right to invade a country. Right. And
Paranto, at least, Chris Paranto confirmed that we were running weapons through Libya. I mean,
there's no doubt about it. I mean, look, yeah. Hillary Clinton was running. That's what the Mark Turi case was all about.
Right.
Hillary Clinton was, illegally shipping weapons through Libya through Turkey to get them to the ISIS and other Al-Qaeda elements or Al-Qaeda related elements in Syria.
And let me ask.
John McCain was in the middle of that too, supporting.
Absolutely, yes, he was. And let me ask. When Reagan was, propping up the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Russians and run the Soviet Union out of money and collapse the Soviet Union, which I think was a great thing to do, although, it came back to bite us. I think this is a totally different game and a whole new level of planning and evil intentions in terms of arming ISIS and al-Nusra and some of these other terrorists in Syria and other areas.
Well, I mean, right now you've got a whole situation where the American left has embraced Islam. And I think Horowitz is right. This is kind of an unholy alliance where the radical Islamicists going back to Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979 started embracing communist principles. And the socialists on the left have embraced the radicals of Islam, ignoring all the obvious issues with regards to women and abuse of women, simply because, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they both are anti-American. The American left is anti-American today. The American left wants to rewrite the Constitution, wants to end free speech, and the globalists are on the side and increasingly in the open supporting these anti-American positions. In Great Britain, they're debating a law which will essentially criminalize any criticism of Islam, which is essentially writing Sharia law principles into British law,
right? So
that Islam will be beyond reproach, and you'll be considered a criminal if you do criticize any aspect of
Islam. So much for the Magna Carta.
Well, that seems to be happening all throughout Europe. I mean, you get in trouble for denying the Holocaust or saying, I mean, that seems to be kind of systemic as far as stifling, political free speech.
Denying the Holocaust is another whole historical issue because it traces back to, the supporting of Nazism and things of that nature. Yeah. And I think that I think certain of these aspects, I don't know that I would imprison someone for denying the Holocaust, but I do think it's appropriate to point out the historically factual nature of the Holocaust and to insist that the history, going back to what I said at the very beginning, I think facts and history do matter in these debates. And when the debates get ideologically driven, we have now that Hillary and the crowd and the left would like to imprison or put in thought reform the deplorables. We're not just deplorables, we're thought criminals.
Yes.
And I think once we cross that line, I think facts matter, can be used in a debate, whether you want to debate the climate issues or whatever.
Right.
And, you don't become, you shouldn't be in prison because you have these beliefs. If you look at the First Amendment cases, one of the ones I always liked the best was a case called Whitney v. U.S., which Judge Brandeis decided, I believe, in the 1920s, and he said, there's got to be a whole set of circumstances before someone's prosecuted for giving a speech. If you give a speech and say, I think we should have a revolt against the United States, a communist revolution, and nobody's listening to you, you're a nutcase on some park bench.
Right.
Or if you've got an organization that's preparing to do it, and it's imminent that you could succeed, these are two different circumstances. And the one should be allowed under free speech, and the second may be charged under insurrection or treason, inciting violence or something of that nature. But again, I'm very much in, believing that we need a robust First Amendment, a robust Second Amendment, a robust Fourth Amendment, and I'm in general very suspicious of government activity, regardless of who's in power.
Well, and journalists need to be able to do their work without the worry of imprisonment as well. I mean, it becomes a very slippery slope. We've seen, if you're a fan of Jordan Peterson, anybody, you go to these college campuses and one of these Antifa or these anti-fascist individuals, like, I don't like what you're saying, so you can't exercise your free speech on our college campus. Like, that is just straight BS.
Well, it's an infringement of the First Amendment that's beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And, these are the ideologically driven left doesn't want the First Amendment because they don't want the argument. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want the argument to be examined. They can only win if the argument stays ideologically driven. They lose on fact bases. I mean, the fact is that the Earth is not warming up. The fact is that CO2 levels are not at dangerous levels historically, and the Earth is inherently an unstable place. I mean, the great ice ages didn't recede because there were little cavemen with their little fires, their hydrocarbon fires inside caves.
Right.
The sun, big news to the this whole global warming, climate change crowd is that Earth is heated by the sun. Sun heats Earth, and when the sun cools off, which it is right now, we're probably going into a cooling period.
Right. Yeah, we're in a solar minimum right now, and we're entering a mini ice age by the honest scientists' words.
And do you think because of that, because we are going into the cooling and they've embraced and invested so much into this global warming that they're going to engage in what we know through government documents happens, is terraforming or weather modification or geoengineering to warm the planet?
All those things are. George Carlin did a comic routine in the 70s, and he said, we as humans exaggerate. He was very funny about it. He said, we're like fleas to the Earth. We're a nuisance.
Right.
We don't really make any impact on the Earth's climate. These forces are, they can do all the geoengineering they want to do, and it's not going to really produce much effect because it's going to be insignificant in terms of the magnitude of the forces that drive the Earth.
Interesting.
I mean, can you imagine how much force is involved in one of these hurricanes? I mean, just take a look at the massive amount of force that we don't have the ability to create that kind of force.
Now, wait a minute, Doctor.
Yeah,
we've had 150 hurricanes since 1850, and the last one was due to climate change.
Yeah, right. I doubt that. The point is this. The Earth is inherently unstable. The Earth has gone through many, many different periods. In New Jersey, where I live, the most common any kind of relic or fossil that you can pick up, fossils are shark's teeth. Well, there's no big ocean or lake over New Jersey now, but there was. The Earth is inherently changed.
Yeah, very chaotic. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I promise you about 30, 40 minutes. We've gone a little bit over, but I do want to ask you this. This is breaking news. The Justice Department sues Edward Snowden over publication of new memoir. The government argues the book violates the non-disclosure agreements it says Snowden signed with the CIA and NSA. Comment on that?
Well, I mean, again, the government is just trying to, and this is, the deep state. Trump does not have control yet over all these operatives. I'll give you my suggestion on that in a minute, but the government's just trying to prevent Snowden with his new book, which is about to be delivered, from exposing again to the American people the vast amount of illegal surveillance of the population that's being done by our intelligence agencies, who are rampant into the abuse. I think you can assume that all of our electronic communications are being recorded. And, my solution to the deep state, I was very pleased to see the Department of Agriculture starting to move some of its divisions out of Washington. I'd say put the Department of Agriculture somewhere in the middle of Kansas or Iowa, put the State Department in Nome, Alaska, and relocate the IRS to the Mojave Desert, and see how many of these bureaucrats want to move.
Dr. Jerome Corsi has a sense of humor, ladies and gentlemen. I like it. Well, and another thing, when we talk about Trump being a white hat, and believe me, I want to believe that. I do. I think the crimes that have been engaged in, whether it's political crimes, money laundering, trading in guns and arms and people and body parts, et cetera, there's got to be some accountability. So please, if you don't mind, give me your opinion on this phenomenon we know as QAnon. Is it legit? Is it hope porn? I call it hope porn because nothing ever happens. But is this real? Is something going to come of this?
Well, I broke ways with it. I think initially there was something to it, and I had some pretty good indications there was something to it, but at some point or other, it got hijacked and taken over. I mean, it became they started attacking me or anyone who wanted to make money, and doing this for a living.
Right.
I don't know how you're supposed to survive if you don't have any income.
Right.
But at any rate, and they became repetitive, constantly promising this was going to happen and that was going to happen. And it never happened. I've been saying from the beginning that I have confidence in God and enough people praying for justice that we will get justice. But it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be fast. That's why I say it's going to take 3 phases. And I think we're seeing now the Democrats are out in the open as socialists who hate America. And Nadler today with his hearing in Lewandowski is reinforcing that point.
Right.
I think letting these people, one of the things I've been most pleased about is to see this exposed. And I mean, when you look at what the Obama administration was doing with, Saul Alinsky exploiting these Ferguson shootings, and demonizing police with Fast and Furious, with the shipping of weapons to the terrorists of the Arab Spring and Benghazi. I mean, all these things are just, to me, so enormously criminal by the government. And, the out-of-control spending that we're doing. I mean, we are at a point where without Donald Trump, if it had been Hillary Clinton, or if a socialist gets in again, I think the United States is at a precarious point whether or not we will have freedom. But I think that if Donald Trump wins re-election, Donald Trump's by no means perfect. He's not but I have watched him for 40 years. And I always have said about Donald Trump, he always looks like he's going to lose until just before he wins. And he does come out with, the strategies. I mean, look at how the dealing with China and the dealing with Mexico has the potential to just say to China, we're not going to do a deal with you if it's a bad deal. Walking away from Kim Jong-un. I mean, sure, go talk to the guy, but if the guy's not, say we're leaving, pack up your bags and leave town.
Walk away from a bad deal. Yeah.
Walk away from a bad deal. And Trump is not going to, even with Bolton, who I'm sure was in there with hard lines on everything. And Trump, after a while, said, well, let Bolton give his hard line. But, we can't go attack everybody. We're not going to solve all the problems of the world. George Washington was right. Our primary responsibility is to maintain freedom and economic success in this country.
Right.
But it seems like you have globalists ensconced in so many of these different countries. It seems like that agenda seems to transcend, sovereignty of a given country, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think they're all going to fail. I think that Great Britain is looking to pull out of the EU. I'm hoping the Brexit movement succeeds. It looks to me like Italy is catching on to the EU. The EU is going to have a very hard time staying together.
Brazil elected a Trump-like president.
Around the world, I think people are catching on to that socialism is a lie. It's an evil lie. And, the Venezuelans are all that socialism has ever produced. And Americans, I don't think, want to live under that. Now, we've still got to understand that we have created a massive social welfare state by the Democrats incrementally getting more and more benefits to people. And this has got to be rolled back because we just cannot, we cannot afford to pay all the contingent liabilities that have been created.
Well, and that goes for corporate welfare, too, I have to say. I mean, that's a lot of that. I mean, that's just coming out of our pocket as well.
Well, I mean, the whole tax system should be reconsidered. There's no tax scheme in the Constitution at all.
Right.
Except for putting tariffs on other goods coming into the United States.
Well, that's what I always found fascinating when I was researching about the income tax. I mean, that was found unconstitutional so many times in different Supreme Court decisions. Then all of a sudden, 1913, along with the Federal Reserve Act, it, becomes law.
Well, you had Woodrow Wilson in there. You had another, globalist in there. And so, but I think the American people and the world are waking up to, the globalism, there's lots of issues, the Satanism, which I think is, gone along with the hard left. This has all got to be exposed and put down. But, the United States is the last chance I think the world has to establish a government, is based on Roman law, Roman principles, Aristotle, the Greeks in terms of balanced government and studying constitutions. We've got a constitution that is inherently suspect of government. And the globalists who want to control the world and all the rest of it end up, I think, being exposed that they're the ones who want to be the oligarchs living in the mansions while nobody else has anything. Yeah. And they'll lie to everybody in terms of social justice, which they don't, I think, have any intention of fulfilling. And is not even necessarily a goal. Yes, we should seek social justice, but to make everybody equal is inherently impossible. We're all born to different families with different abilities and different techniques in different places at different times. So we're not all equal, and they're never going to be all equal. And that's just, some fundamental facts of human nature, which the hard left, not believing in God, thinks that they can change at their will. And it's just not possible to do. Human nature is inherently something that's subject to failure. It's subject to sin. It's subject to evil. And governments and systems have to be designed knowing that human beings cannot be perfected.
Well, we do have probably one of the most perfect documents with the U.S. Constitution, and under that law, we have more freedoms, I think, than anywhere in the country. But for me, and I know Pat too, it's very disconcerting when you still see, whether Trump or whoever's in office, when you still see whatever it was designed for, something like a Patriot Act still in play, something like NDAA 1 and 2, which allows for the indefinite detention of Americans and potential assassination of Americans, and propaganda being legal on American citizens. This was all so disconcerting to me under the U.S. Constitution. So I think we need to find a way to resolve, having this amazing document and actually starting to put some teeth into it when it relates to so many of these things that violated these wars and all of this that we've discussed today.
Well, there needs to be accountability. We've always had it. I mean, Abraham Lincoln fighting the Civil War suspended habeas corpus,
right?
Imprisoned journalists. I mean, you go back to any historical. We had the Espionage Acts in World War I and World War II. We put in 1913 the Federal Reserve System. I mean, all these things that Congress and historic mistakes that have been made, which take a long time to rectify. But we have a chance right now, hopefully, to have a revival in belief in God and a revival in fundamental values in the Constitution, because I think the left has gone so insane to show who it really is.
Very true.
And if Trump has done anything, brought out the Nadlers and these others who are
expose them.
Yeah, and got them expose themselves.
Yeah. Well, and that's what this extreme left has done too. I mean, they literally. I mean, when you hear AOC or the Squad or Antifa or any of this, it's like, wow, this is just on its face insane. And going to Antifa, and I'm going to let you go after this one question. the future. You know, more people are waking up, but as we, the old school cats who understand the rule of law, fade away, are they weaponizing the youth, this next generation of voters, to be more socialist, to embrace illegal immigration, which is just weaponizing a voting block, et cetera, more lack of free speech, all of these different things that move toward this kind of socialist, authoritarian way of life? Do you think they're kind of gearing the kids for that?
Well, I think, clearly that's the entire intent from Bill Ayers on, and the socialists, is to take hold of the schools and indoctrinate the kids. Now, they've done that to a large extent in the colleges. But I think one of the things that happens, and again, it's the exposing to reality, as these millennials get out and are not finding the jobs that they were promised, are learning that, companies are hesitant to hire millennials. What are they going to come in to do and police your plastic straw policy? I mean, you're trying to run a business here. You're hiring these guys that are worried about LG. They're painting rainbows on all your buildings. I mean, is this why I hired you?
Right.
And so these are the kinds of things that are reality. Is this millennial generation gets older and more of the corruption in these universities, which are just greed machines, that are fueled by government, by Obama nationalizing the tuition programs. These are things that have got to be stopped. And it comes back to money, and it comes back to a socialist agenda. We're always going to be fighting these socialist agendas. We're always going to be fighting something, because I think our founders were right that, America's values, liberty, can be lost in any given generation.
Yeah.
Right.
And the one coming up has the potential to lose it too.
I will say this, though. My two oldest daughters are in high school, and their entire class is in a pretty big high school here in Iowa. And I will say that literally almost the entire class are conservatives because of what they have seen the millennials do and implode themselves and make themselves look like fools. And all these kids in high school across the nation who are the next generation after the millennials are watching these idiots and going, I don't want anything to do with that. So they will be the biggest generation of conservatives this nation has ever seen.
And as the millennials age, historically, across human experience, people are more to the left when they're young, and they get more to the right as they get older.
What do they say? If you're not a liberal when you're young, you're heartless, and if you're not a conservative when you're older, you're brainless.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much an old saying, and it's been attributed to different people. But the point is, it's true in this generation. Facing through college, many of these kids are protected. They're coddled. They don't have to deal with fundamental issues. They're not worried about where their next meal is coming from or where they're going to sleep. Unless they are aspiring to go out and join the homeless in San Francisco, reality is going to have to hit some point or other. And when it does, they're going to realize more and more why people are conservative, and it is because the traditional values that have been taught since the Bible and probably before then have root in human character, human nature, and how things can and should work. And if you don't follow these fundamental rules, you get 1,000 forms of gender, all of which are equal. Moral relativism.
Right. All these pronouns.
You get Nadler. You get change the language. You tear down historical statues. I mean, all these things are just insane. These are not the things we should be being worried about when we've got $1 trillion new deficit every year.
Without a doubt, man. And we could probably have this conversation forever. And obviously, you are welcome back anytime if you want to promote a book. His latest book, ladies and gentlemen, is Coup d'etat: Exposing Deep State Treason.
That's coming out hopefully in December.
Oh, okay.
It's being sold right now on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and it's doing pretty well in pre-sales. But it will. I've edited it. It's now going through the final edits and the printing and the shipping to the stores. It'll take until about December to get it on the bookshelves.
Well, be on the lookout for it, ladies and gentlemen. And again, thank you so very much for your time. And I appreciate the dialogue, sir. Any disagreement we may have perceived otherwise, I so appreciate what you do. And it is so very important that we have more of these exchanges of ideas and dialogue and conversation.
Absolutely. And how else can people find you on social media, Doctor?
CorsiNation.com. CorsiNation.com. And I've begun doing some more live streaming and podcasting, and I'm going to be doing more on CorsiNation.com.
Well, you should. You have a very, very keen insight. Like you said, you've been around the game for a minute, and you know all the players. And again, appreciate your work, sir, and continued success.
Okay, God bless. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jerome Corsi with us today. Peace and so much love. Stay tuned. There'll always be more.